this is what I'm going to show you how to make in this video. As always, you can get this full project file, the entire template, the samples, MIDI, presets, plus the Ableton file are all available at the top of the description on my website for just $5. It's a great value. In my opinion, one of the best templates for this style that you can grab, and it's something that'll take your tracks to the next level today. Even if you're doing other genres, this would still help you. Like, this is one of the best templates I think I've ever made. So, links at the top of the description. Definitely go grab that. Don't miss out, guys, while it's available. Let's dive in. Alright, so we're at 137 BPM, and I've basically split this into 3 different groups. We have sort of like the main drums in your face. We have the extra drums that fill it out. And then we have the synths and the lead layers. And so this is the order you want to think of these in. Like, when I was making this, I started with this groove and just got this really solid. You know, then you can start to bring in some of these other things. But the point is starting with the foundation, because this style is one of the ones where people get lost the most, because they think, like, you know, start with maybe a breakbeat or a cool synth or something. It's like, maybe that stuff could inspire it, but really you want to just get like a solid like kick and snare groove. Right, so the way I made this one is it's actually this like very hard kick. And I did this little technique where you put a low pass filter with a very fast envelope on that. So what it does is it takes that big like fat kick and just makes it a little bit shorter and tighter, right? So I've got that. The snare is these 2 snares I chopped out of some breakbeats. You can hear it layered together. That creates a really solid snare. And again, now we just have like a really powerful foundation. Also got a little 8th note hi-hat, or 16th note hi-hat, but it's an 808 sample. And this thing as well, which is just another kick from a breakbeat that I chopped out. It's playing kind of with the main kick, and it's got a bit of distortion. You can hear it just adding some groove. So that's the first step of making this. Again, probably not what you would think, because you think, oh, breakbeat, let's start with a breakbeat. But if you don't have this, the breakbeat's going to sound really weak, and you're always going to be confused as to why it's not quite matching up. So from there, then I added in this amen break. And you can see when you have the foundation, it sits really well on top of that. I also use this beats mode, and if you set this like this, where it's just going straight through, you can use this knob here as like a transient shaper. See, make it really tight. So I have that kind of turned down a little. Then I added in this breakbeat, which is subtle, but you can see it's just got a lot of nice like highs. And that's also sidechained to the snare a little bit, but it fills out over top of the amen break. And then finally I added in this breakbeat, which, as you can hear, has a lot more mid-range. So then when you add that back in with everything else, you have this very balanced like thing that's taking up all of, presumably all of the spectrum, but without clashing, because everything is very well chosen to fit together. And then the last thing here is this shaker, which you may not even super notice, but what it is it's just doing like, it's just these 2 samples. And what that does is I'll show it, if you hear like the foundation samples without that and then with it. See, it just helps you get that nice kind of like thing. It just brings that out a little bit. You can hear it in the whole mix. So that's like a little trick to kind of make that groove hit a little bit harder. Again, the whole drums without it. And then with it. You can hear a subtle difference, but it's just helping the groove. And that's all of the breakbeat. So again, you see it's really not too much processing. It's not too much magic other than just using your ear to pick sounds that fit together and getting that really powerful kick and that really powerful snare to just sit right on top. So then we move down to the synths, the first of which, and probably the most foundational, being the bass. So this is kind of telling the chord progression. I say telling because it's almost like a story, right? That's how you want to think about it. But basically, we're going up this D minor scale. That's the key we're in. We start out on the root note, and then we go up to this minor third here, up to a fourth. And then what I think kind of gives it a nice musical thing is actually going up to the sixth there, because you're probably, once you hear, you're expecting the fifth, but it kind of tricks you because then you get that sixth, which is kind of like uneasy. And then we go minor seventh, which is also kind of walking you back to the root note. And then another fourth. And then it resolves really well. And that's the other thing too. When you're making this kind of a progression, it's not just about, making something with the scale or some kind of a melody, but you want to make something that can really resolve. Like this holding out on this. See how that resolves really well? Like that's just going to end that really nicely. And then by walking it back down, especially to a voice like the fourth, which is kind of like very diplomatic, so to speak, with that root note, like they'll fit together well. You can make this resolve really nicely and make it feel like every time it comes back, it's really like landing right back where it's supposed to. As opposed to like, I hear a lot of tracks where people try to do these crazy bass lines and they're not really thinking about resolving it, just getting it to a crazy place at the end. And it's like, you got to walk back down the mountain, right? It's not enough to just climb up to the top. If you just climb up to the top, you get stuck. So now, for the actual sound on this one, the way that you get it so fat is through 3 layers. It starts with a sub, right? And this is just operator. It's a square wave with a low pass. Like a very simple sub, but it gives you a really fat, just full sounding, powerful sub, right? Then we have a Reese bass on top of that, made with analog, which is this pulse wave. You can see there's a bunch of LFO on that. Detuned from a saw wave. They're both going into a low pass and some unison and vibrato. Pretty simple. And then I'm high passing that. But you can see that fills out like the higher low end of that sub nicely. And it's giving some movement with the detune as well. Then on top of that, because you can hear this still isn't very it's not got a lot of mid-range and really not even that full low mid-range. Then I added this, which is just like pure texture. So what this is, it's made with wavetable, the saw wave and a square wave. I've got a bandpass filter. It's also got a bunch of unison. And then we have a little bit of an envelope on the bandpass. You don't need that much because if you turn that up, you just get it just kind of becomes a high pass. But if you do enough of that, you'll get like that really nice like vocal texture almost. And then we're putting that through some chorus, a bunch of distortion. Here's without that. And then with it, you can hear what that's doing. Obviously, that works together with the bandpass. And then we're high passing it. And even though this on its own sounds kind of thin, obviously, it has that nice like low mid-range and mids to it. So when you drop it in over top of those last 2 layers I showed you, it just sounds like one big, huge bass. And when you're when you're hearing this in a track, you're like, how would you ever get that out of one synth patch? But it's really not. It's like 3 very simple synth patches to make if you think about it. I mean, the hardest one's probably this wavetable, and that really doesn't even take, that's just a pretty basic knowledge of sound design to do that as well. Then we have this little pad. And what this is doing is it's playing off of what the bass is doing. If I play them, you can hear. Right, so it's all just like that. And this is actually kind of taking that idea from some of the melodic, like hard techno type of stuff we've been doing on this channel recently, where, you have like that bass just kind of saying the chord progression, and then this is like more so floating over top of it, rather than trying to be the exact same progression. But you can hear you get a nice clash between them. Like when this is playing F, and then I have this doing an E minor chord. But then we walk up to that F, like it's kind of, it's like this combination of what it's doing against the bass line, and also just how long it takes to resolve that. Like it even makes a major chord sound a bit evil. But that works really well, and it just plays off of that bass so nicely to kind of fill out the track. For the sound, it's made with analog. It's a square wave with a bit of, you can see the pulse width's about there. I've got a low pass filter with a little envelope, or a little LFO on it, some vibrato, a bit of chorus, and then this auto pan. That's what's giving it the like vroom, vroom, vroom. See, I've got that on 1/6, so it's like this triplet. And we turn the phase off, so it's just affecting the volume, and that can give it nice movement. And also, as well as giving that like a nice movement, it's also helping it fit better in the mix, so it's not right up in your face. Because this would clash with the lead if you didn't have that. And then there's just a bit of reverb, high pass filter, and then we have the lead. So this lead is a combination of what's happening in the MIDI and also a little bit of automation, which I'll show you. So in terms of the MIDI, it's this pretty simple pattern in D minor. Like if you look at this musically, we're going root note, 5th, 6th, minor 7th, another root note up here, another minor 7th, another 6th. And if you notice, those are already notes that were being used in the bass line. So that's really how you want to come up with this. Now, to tell you the truth, when I came up with this, I actually came up with the lead first and then muted it and did the whole process I was saying with like making the foundations. So the bass was actually kind of designed off of what was happening here. But that's the thing. You could pick, like in this case, it's just 3 notes. It's literally just 3 notes, or excuse me, 4 notes across different octaves, right? Just D, A sharp, and C. And you can do a lot with that and create this very like bouncy pattern. And that's really what I think makes this sound so hectic yet catchy, is because you think you're hearing a lot of notes because of how fast it's happening, but it's actually only 3 or 4 notes out of the scale. And another thing that's happening here is kind of like resolving to this A every single time, like each time it comes back. It makes sure that the last note is A. So that's the MIDI. And then for the actual automation I was talking about, so there's this arpeggiator on here. And what happened was I automated this, so you can see it kind of turns on at the end of the pattern. And then that's doing 16th notes up 2 octaves. So you're getting this like, I'll show you, I'll just turn it off. It's still a pretty catchy pattern, but this just adds that like crazy thing. And it goes nicely too because it's adding that like change in the da-da-da, like you're getting some 16th notes all of a sudden. One very small detail you'll notice though. See, this one starts here and ends right at that last 16th note. This one doesn't. So it's like those tiny little details that are just going to make this play a little bit differently. Now check out if I make them the same. See, it's really subtle, but it just adds that little difference that's going to make it a bit more exciting. So, for the synth patch here, this is probably the most complicated one in this video, but it's not really that hard. It's analog. We've got a square wave, or a pulse wave, I should say, with a bunch of LFO on the pulse width, and then a saw wave. You can see the pulse wave is going to filter 1, saw wave is going to filter 2. Filter 1 is a 4-minute filter with key tracking, and we've got that set like that, you know, and that's what's really doing that, like, kind of crazy texture. If I turn it off, so it's kind of just a basic like saw wave type sound, right? But then this gives you that like vocal thing, and the key tracking goes really well with that too, so it's different every time. Then we've also got the low pass set like this with a bunch of key tracking and an envelope on it as well. Then we just got some vibrato. So these three are kind of creating the texture on it. Here's without these. You can see what it sounds like dry. So I distorted it. Obviously that sounds really nice. You know, that really brings out the sound and just brings it to life. But then what I did is I added this EQ before that to cut out some of those lower frequencies that were muddy and then boost some of the highs. So then it sounds like this. It's more focused on what you want it to be. You know, it's less mud and more like high end. And then just a bit of chorus. I've got a bit of echo and then a little drum bus. You can see it's being blended on there. And that's the lead. And then the last thing here is this vocal. So this is a vocal sample I just brought in here. You can see I pitched it until it was in key. I wanted to do this in the simpler. Usually, obviously, you just put vocals like in the actual arrangement like this. But by doing it this way, you get something a bit more interesting because it's not going to be so perfectly on the grid. You're getting this like... And it's not, again, like you're not sitting there looking at it on the grid. It's just when that note hits, the vocal plays. And it sounds very natural, I feel. We just got a bit of overdrive, a bit of reverb, and that's it for the vocal. And that's also going to be it for this one, guys. So, I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full, super high quality template that will take your tracks to the next level today, right at the top of the description. Don't miss out, guys. This is the best thing you can do right now to make better tracks and really get where you're trying to get. This is not just for me. It does really help support me. But it's really about supporting you guys and giving you the best templates to make the best music you've ever made in your life. Links at the top of the description to make the best music you've ever made. Thank you so much for the support, everybody, and I'll see you soon with another video.